Hello guys, welcome to my new video. Today we're looking at the Resto Shaman Mythic Plus guide. I've decided to split up the different versions of Resto Shaman guides into two because mainly of the length reasons. I don't want the videos to be too long. So if you do want to see the raid version of Resto Shaman guide, let me know in the comments below. I'll try to read all the comments and see how many people want to see it. But this video is based for Mythic Plus and therefore it's going to be somewhat advanced. It's going to be looking at talents, conduits, soulbinds. It's going to be looking at how to play Vesper, how to optimize Vesper, is Kyrian the best, how do I play 4-set bonus, how do I approach different situations, do I use healing rain, do I use chain heal, how do I optimize healing and DPS, because it is somewhat advanced. It is looking at players who are trying to get or climb Mythic Plus in terms of higher and higher keys. DPS is going to be a big portion of that, so we will look at healer DPS or Resto Shaman DPS, we'll look at Resto Shaman healing, so let's go and get started with the talent choice. So this is my shaman right now, and these are going to be Mythic Plus talents that I go by, but keep in mind my talent choice is going to depend on whether I'm going a more survivability build, whether I'm playing fortified or tyrannical weeks, because I do think there's a lot of talent choices there are somewhat personal or dependent on what you need at that given moment. So straight away, undulations, something that people use a lot because it just gives you more healing without giving you an additional button. So you don't have an additional button to press, instead you have more time to spend on your basic healing rotation and your basic DPS rotation, which we'll cover later on. Very, very easy to use. I do have a weak aura for this, but most of the time, if someone needs healing, I'm gonna be using healing on them. I'm not going to be tracking or putting too much attention onto this. There are people who try to optimize it with cloud bursts and things like that. You can do that, but a lot of the times it's just kind of auto mode or autopilot. You heal if people need healing. So 25 echoes and elements pretty much locked in. Tier 30 and tier 40 is going to be something that you're going to be picking based on what you need. This is my fortified week talent build. I use this build for fortified weeks because I get static charge. Static charge is going to give me or allow me to use my AoE stun more often, and I feel that's really, really important during fortified weeks where the mobs just hit you so hard. Now, in tier 40, again, Ancestral Vigor is another of those talents where it's completely passive, it gives survivability to everyone in the party, and it don't have an additional button to press. Instead, you can focus on your basic DPS and healing rotation, which is the way I view these passive talents. Now, tier 40 is completely dependent on yourself. Majority of people are going to be picking Nature's Guardian because I do feel this is going to allow you to survive. It's a more of a defensive option. I do like Graceful Spirit because all of a sudden I'll be able to use my Spirit Walker's Grace more often, which is really solid for a lot of dungeons where you need healing on the move. I think SD or Sanguine Deaths is a big dungeon where I feel I would love to have Spirit Walker's Grace on this, or 1 minute Spirit Walker's Grace, but instead I would probably go Nature's Guardian because it is more defensive. And then Cloudburst and then Ascendance, these are pretty much lock-in picks right now, and a lot of people are going to be using. There has been some thought about High Tide because of the 4-set bonus, but there's not enough testing for me to even cover this. Ascendance, big oh crap button every 3 minutes, Cloudburst Totem, bread and butter, and it's becoming bigger and bigger heal with the 4-set bonus. Now, for tyrannical weeks, or weeks where I feel like I need as much defensives as possible, Nature's Guardian Spirit Wolf. This is my tyrannical week, oh crap type of talent build. Spirit Wolf can almost be considered to be a scuffed version of bear form for Guardian Druids or Resto Druids. If you know that there's going to be, and again, there's bunch of Mythic Plus dungeons where like Necrotic Wake, where you know you're going to be the first boss in Necrotic Wake, you get picked, and you know in the next couple of seconds there's going to be a big massive hit on you. You need to survive. You can actually go into Spirit Wolf or into your Ghost Wolf form and then stack up this defensive. And this is why I say this is a scuffed version of the bear form for Resto Druids, because it does take a little while to stack up, but it will provide you, at 4 stacks, it provides you 20% damage reduction. And then on top of that you have Nature's Guardian, so this combo allows you to be more tanky and survive those hits. This is the type of talent build I use when I feel I need kind of survivability, and there are a bunch of Mythic Plus dungeons out there that put a dot on you, and the next 4 or 5 seconds, you're gonna take massive amount of hit. Plaguefall second last boss jumps to mind straight away, where you're going to have to move out of the party, you have a couple of seconds, you can stack up your Spirit Wolf talent, allow you to survive those hits. These are the 2 builds that I run as Resto Shaman. Now let's go to Covenants, Conduits, and Soulbinds and all those things. And right now, if you look at the most popular builds for Resto Shaman in terms of what are people running in high-end keys, what are people running in Mythic Plus in general, Kyrian is just the way to go. It's by far the most popular Covenant, and honestly, it was always going to be Kyrian unless it was going to get a really heavy nerf. Vesper did get a nerf, but it wasn't big enough to dethrone Kyrian from being the #1 pick choice. And this is my Resto Shaman Vesper Totem Kyrian setup in terms of Soulbinds and in terms of Conduits. Now, you'll notice the main source is going to be your Mykonikos. Mykonikos is the main owl. This is the guy that most of the Resto Shamans are going to be picking. If you're playing Vesper, you're going to want a Fusive Armor Accelerator. This thing is going to drive your gameplay in Mythic Plus with Vesper Totem. A Fusive Armor Accelerator is going to give you damage. It's going to give you cooldown reduction to your Covenant specific ability, which is Vesper Totem, based on how many enemies got hit. Now, this is very popular for a lot of healers out there. This is really important, and we'll talk about this in the gameplay section on how to optimize this, because if you don't optimize this, your cooldown reduction is going to be poor. You're going to have less Vesper Totems, you're going to have less damage and healing, you're going to have less Cloud Burst, and it's all going to trickle down into a worse performance. So besides that, in terms of Conduits, Elysian Dirge, this is something that is going to be used by a lot of Resto Shamans out there. It basically allows you to do more single target healing and more single target damage, and again, pretty decent choice because it gives you damage, and that's very, very important, because a lot of the times as a healer you'll try to optimize damage in as many ways as possible. And on top of that, you're going to run Swirling Currents. Swirling Currents is an amazing potency conduit both for Mythic Plus and Raid. You're pretty much never going to swap away from this. It's very, very solid choice. There's nothing to say about this. On top of that, you're not going to have a third potency. You're not going to go here. You're going to go into Hammer of Genesis, which is going to give you more haste, and it's going to provide you with more damage and healing. Haste is a very, very solid stat in Mythic Plus. It's not that amazing in Raid, but in Mythic Plus, you want to have haste. So all of a sudden, you're running 2 potency conduits, you're running Elysian Dirge, you're running Swirling Currents, and you're getting Hammer of Genesis. So there actually is an honorable mention for Ventier for Mythic Plus Resto Shamans who are pushing keys, because I don't think it's the best build, but I think it's a fun alternative, because I tried this out on PTR a while ago, and again, you're running Ventier, you're running Chain Harvest. Chain Harvest is going to have a certain synergy with your Covenant Legendary, because there's going to be a reduction on Chain Harvest based on Flame Shock crits. And there is a Legendary for Elemental called Skybreakers, which is going to increase your Flame Shock crit. So with this Legendary, the amount of cooldown reduction you're going to get on Chain Harvest is going to be insane. And when this is combined with Theodar, again, it doesn't have to be Theodar, but I tested on PTO with Theodar, with Wasteland Propriety, you're having an insane uptime giving out stats to your party. So not only it is a build where you're getting a huge amount of Chain Harvest casts, you're also getting a big uptime on stats that you're giving out to your parties. I definitely feel this is an interesting build. I want you to try it out. I don't have the Legendary right now in order to have the cooldown reduction on Chain Harvest, but I definitely tried it out in PTR and it was really, really fun. In perfect case situations, I don't think this build is good enough to take down Kyrian Vesper Totem with perfect Earth Elemental usage. I think Kyrian Vesper Totem with perfect Elemental or Earth Elemental usage is an insanely good build, but if you're looking for something different, something out there, and you're really sick of Kyrian and you're not pushing the highest keys in the world or whatever, I think this is a really fun option. Now let's go in terms of Legendaries, and again, we're using sub-creation data. We've used sub-creation data before. It is an amazing source to look at what most top-end players or players who are doing Mythic Plus, who are doing raiding, what are they using in terms of gear, in terms of talents. And in terms of Legendaries, the most popular option right now, surprise, surprise, Vesper Totem, which is your Covenant Legendary, your Unity, on top of the fact Earth Elemental or Deep Tremor Stone Legendary. Now, you look at my Resto Shaman in terms of, again, we'll talk about the gearing later on. In terms of Legendaries, I am using the same combo. I do have my Vesper Totem Unity, and it allows my Vesper Totem to provide more damage and healing, especially the damage portion. The damage portion is really, really significant. We'll talk about that in gameplay section. And then you have your Earth Elemental. Now, what the heck? It adds Earthquake to your Earth Elemental, and all of a sudden, as long as your Earth Elemental doesn't die, as long as it's capable of living, the amount of damage that this Earthquake is going to do, especially on trash pack posts, is going to be insane. This is a pure DPS Legendary. It provides no healing whatsoever, and it's something that a lot of Resto Shamans are going to be picked because they feel they don't need the healing. If you're just up-and-coming Resto Shaman who's just gearing up, who's doing a lot of pugs, who's not uncertain about whether the party is going to... If you have to babysit your party a lot, if your DPS and tanks are making a lot of mistakes, if they're not using mitigation, if they're not using personals, you might opt in for a healing Legendary instead. If you're doing high keys with an organized group and you're doing it with a competitive tank, and you tell your tank, hey, I'm about to pop my Earthquake, or about to pop my Earth Elemental with Earthquake, do you feel you're going to keep aggro on every mob? If they feel confident, go for it. This is why I feel like in a lot of high keys, this is going to be the #1 pick, but in lower end keys, I'm not 100% certain if it's going to be worth it. Now, if you absolutely hate your Earth Elemental, which to some extent I'm starting to hate my Earth Elemental, because believe it or not, a lot of tanks hate the Earth Elemental Legendary because they need to pop their offensive cooldowns. Like for example, if you're running with Guardian Druid, if they're using Incarn, this is going to be a perfect time to use an Earth Elemental because your bear is going to have a lot more threat. Now, outside of Incarnation, would you use Earth Elemental on a Guardian Druid during Trashback pull? Probably not. Earth Elemental is most likely going to pull aggro and it's going to die instantly. A lot of people ask me about Earth Elemental dying instantly. There's not a lot of things you can do in certain situations. So, if you absolutely hate it, a lot of people have been talking about using something like Chains of Devastation. And it's something that I tried out. I haven't tried out in high-end Mythic Plus keys, but I can see how this is going to synergize with the 4-set. I would never use Chains of Devastation if you do not have the 4-set. If you have the 4-set and all of a sudden using Chain Lightning, Chain Heal crits are going to provide cooldown reduction to some of your totems, and all of a sudden you can almost say that it's pretty decent. But on single target situations, it doesn't feel amazing, and I do think there might be a different kind of stat priority for this, but I think this is going to gain popularity in the next coming weeks, and I think Resto Shamans who hate Deep Tremor Stone are going to gravitate towards Chains of Devastation. You don't have to run Chains of Devastation. You can actually go into Elemental Spec and get Elemental Equilibrium. This is something that I made a PTR video about, and this provides you with DPS. It kind of, and big pinch of salt here. You can look at my PTR video, you can look at some of the ways I tried to proc Elemental Equilibrium, because you want to proc Elemental Equilibrium buff during your Vesper Totem kind of, you know, explosions, or during your Vesper Totem windows. And this means you're going to have a very rigid rotation during your Vesper Totem. You almost have to be like, I have my Vesper Totem, I need to make sure that I'm going to use a Fire, Frost, and Nature ability very soon, and Fire, Frost, Nature, that means you're going to have to use Flame Shock, Frost Shock, Lightning Bolt, or Chain Lightning, and then I'm going to have to make sure to optimize my Vesper Totem. And a lot of people are going to, I can guarantee you, a lot of people will find this too convoluted, and they rather just use Deep Tremorstone, press and forget type of button, and the other people might be like, okay, I'm up for the challenge. And I think Elemental Equilibrium could be a decent choice if you don't mind a rigid rotation. So this is what I feel is going to be very popular. Legendary choices, in my opinion, if you can optimize your Vesper Totem, if you can optimize your Earth Elemental Earthquake Legendary, it is probably one of the best choices you can run right now. So let's go through gearing, trinkets, and how to optimize your Catalyst creation and things like that. Now, keep in mind, my Resto Shaman is no longer a raiding main. I mainly do Mythic Plus for my Resto Shaman, so gearing my Resto Shaman is a lot more difficult now. But in terms of what trinkets I like to run, again guys, I feel that one pure DPS trinket and then one trinket for something like a stat stick, or a trinket like Unbound Changeling that gives you, like for example, a crit stat increase, which is good for healing and DPS, is a pretty good option. I do think you can do a 2 pure DPS trinket combo, and it's going to depend on what trinkets you have, but keep in mind, if you're running 2 pure DPS trinkets, there might be some situations if you're running like really high Sanguine Death keys, or last boss in Plaguefall, or some of the bosses in TOP where there is a lot of healing required, you might be lacking some of that healing. But again, it's mainly up to you to decide if you can run 2 DPS trinkets. What I'm running right now is a pure DPS trinket and the Unbound Changeling, and I think it's a nice combo. I will try 2 pure DPS trinkets later on, because I do have quite a few combos, and I'll let you know how it feels. But I want to talk about Resonant Reservoir. This almost deserves a chapter in this video by itself. Resonant Reservoir is a trinket that drops from the sausage in the raid. You have to spec as elemental spec for this to get it. Keep that in mind. So you just go into your frames, you go to loot specialization and spec elemental. Quick tip, if you're a Resto Shaman who's just focused on Mythic plus pushing, keeping your spec on elemental is more than sufficient for majority of content out there, because all of the trinkets that you want to get are going to be somewhat hybrid of trinkets. Like Unbound Changeling drops for elemental, but you cannot get Resonant Reservoir as a Resto. You cannot get your Plaguefall trinket, which is also a really nice trinket, as Resto. You have to spec elemental. There's a couple of other trinkets that are also can only be gotten as elemental. So all of a sudden, keeping your loot spec on elemental makes sense if you're just focusing on Mythic Plus, because you don't want any pure healing trinkets as a shaman or any healer pushing high-end keys. That's what the meta has become. So Resonant Reservoir, this trinket is absolutely bonkers. This is your #1 priority. You want to get this trinket as much as possible. It is insane. Just look at the amount of damage it does on some of the keys. We're looking, again, I have the mythic version. We're looking at like 1.5 million, close to 2 million overall damage in a dungeon where I just used it on cooldown. All of a sudden, this trinket in terms of pure damage for a healer is the #1 choice. And the way that it works, if you do have it, again, I have the mythic version of it, it stacks up throughout the dungeon. It stacks up to 4 times. Right now, I have 4 stacks. You can read it here. Your next disintegration halo will fire 4 times. So when you use it, it takes a little bit before there's going to be stuff on the ground that radiates and does tons of damage. So you want to use it in a perfect scenario. You want to use it on a trash back pull with a bunch of trash at 4 stacks. And you can see right now, these little circles going around, so much damage. Now, what happens after 4 stacks, it is going to reset. It's going to go back to 1, and it's something to keep in mind. You're basically stacking up this trinket by using it on cooldown as much as possible, using it on AoE trash bags, because you're going to be doing a lot of AoE damage. So this trinket is something that's going to become more powerful throughout the dungeon, and then it's going to again kind of loop back and forth. And again, #1 choice. If you cannot get this trinket, if you're very, very unlucky, the next best thing would probably be your Plaguefall trinket, your infinitely divisible ooze. Again, very solid trinket, but it's not gonna get close to the numbers of your Resonant Reservoir. Like, Resonant Reservoir is just pray. Just pray you're gonna get it. Outside of that, I also think there is a really solid trinket in Dark Heart Ticket. This is going to be available during Legion Time Walking. This trinket, Oak Heart's Gnarled Root, provides you with versatility. And we'll talk about stat priority. Versatility is going to be your #1 choice in a lot of the cases. We'll talk about why, but this trinket is going to provide you with good stats, and it's going to provide you with decent damage. So there is decent amount of trinkets out there that can provide you with DPS. And on top of that, there's other trinkets, things like stat sticks and stat procs, things like Unbound Changeling is like a #1 stat stick or stat proc type of trinket. It provides you insane amount of addition to healing and damage, which I feel is a nice combination. You also have Gambit trinkets, Soleus, and things like that, which are also very, 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 very solid. You also have some of the raid trinkets from Pantheon that are also stat sticks. Pick a combination that you enjoy. I like pure DPS and then a stat stick or a stat proc, and I think it works for me. I'll try out double DPS later on. In terms of the 4 set, and I don't want to ramble on about trinkets too much, 4 set, my mind has changed about the 4 set. You want to get this as fast as possible. This is an insanely mandatory 4 set for Resto Shamans. And why did my mind change? Because you don't change your gameplay at all. We'll talk about this in the gameplay section, but you don't have to alter your gameplay. A lot of people is like, if I get the 4 set, I need to spam chain heal. Absolutely not. Just placing your totems down that proc the chain heal is going to be an insane amount of HPS gain. So all of a sudden, if you just get the 4 set, like, for example, if you have a 3 set and you're doing Mythic Plus content and you're doing high-end tyrannical keys, high-end fortified keys, and you're struggling, your mana is like running out, I'm like, damn, I can't do this. You get the 4 set, all of a sudden, most of those issues will be gone. You're just going to be playing the same way that you're playing already, and it's just going to feel so much easier. Get this as soon as possible. Now, where to place or craft your legendaries, where to put your 4 set bonus and things like that. The way I have it done currently is going to change in the future. And right now I have Unity crafted on Helm, and I have my Deep Tremorstone Legendary crafted on Belt, which is great because it gives me guaranteed gem sockets, it gives me high stats, and it works for now. But because I'm running Unity on Helm, that means I have to complete a 4 set piece with tier set gloves. And tier set gloves right now give me heavy mastery, and I really don't enjoy that right now. We'll talk about stat priority next, but in terms of your tier sets, what I want to do is to get a Helm tier set as soon as possible, because it gives you crit verse. Really amazing stats for Mythic Plus Resto Shaman. And you can go to auction house, you can go to mail and sort it by Helm, and there is going to be a BOE 278 Helm, male Helm, that drops from the new raid that you can use on your Catalyst creation and convert it to a tier piece. It might be really expensive depending on which server you're running, but it's something to consider because I can use that, I can use the tier Helm, I can then replace my Unity, and I can use Unity on any piece that I feel that is somewhat lacking. And for me, it's probably going to be my ring. I'm going to replace this ring. I'm going to craft again, my unity onto this. I could be crafting it on feet, but my feet is 278. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense right now. So I can use this unity and craft it on any piece where I feel my item level is lackluster, because especially if you're not running mythic raiding, there's probably going to be certain pieces that you might lack. And in my case, I'm going to use it on a ring. And this is my plan in terms of gearing, in terms of force set, in terms of trinkets for my Restoration Shaman in Mythic Plus content. Now, in terms of stat priority for Resto Shaman and Mythic Plus, I think there is too much emphasis, especially for a new Resto Shaman coming into who's gearing. There's too much emphasis on stats. Too many people think that if I change this, all of a sudden I'm gonna get like way bigger numbers. My Shaman is going to pop off. I'm going to be doing way more damage, way more healing. Stats are great and stat priority exists there for a reason, but min-maxing your stat is only really relevant when you have high item level gear and you're really looking to push your character in high-end content. If you're gearing up your Resto Shaman, if you don't have max item level pieces, or if you're just like really low item level, just get highest item level and you're basically going to be good for majority of the content until you reach a point where you really want to optimize. And versatility is going to be your #1 stat the higher keys you do. And I feel like this is going to be relevant, I don't know, 25 plus keys, 26, like I don't want to put an arbitrary number on this, but the higher key you're doing, versatility is going to become bigger and bigger, because versatility gives you damage, healing, and damage reduction. So, all of a sudden, versatility, gearing, gemming, enchanting, versatility on everything. The reason is because the higher tyrannical keys you're going to approach, all of a sudden you'll notice the scaling is a little bit wacky in high tyrannical keys. All of a sudden you don't have shower gear from, you know, previous patches and things like that, and people are just getting one shot, almost one shot from these basic abilities, and having high verse and even avoidance. And again, I don't want to talk about avoidance too much because avoidance is a tertiary stat and you're relatively lucky to get it, but avoidance and versatility are going to become a huge part of any healer gearing in high-end content, especially high tyrannical keys. So verse is going to be by far, or at least in my case, #1 stat. The higher key you go, the better versatility is. If you're not doing really high keys, versatility is it's not gonna be as important. So in my opinion, versatility is going to be #1. In terms of your other stats, I think haste, crit are somewhat close to each other. I think it's going to depend on how much of each stat you have. You have to remember there is kind of diminishing returns after you get 30% off the stat. That's something to consider. So again, verse, haste, crit, somewhat similar, and then mastery being the last stat, and mainly mastery being the last stat because it gives you no damage whatsoever. Mastery is not a bad healing kind of stat that you can have, especially on really healing intensive Mythic Plus content like Sanguine Deaths, Last Boss in Plaguefall, some of the TOP bosses. Those kind of encounters require a lot of healing and people are dropping really low, and mastery would be actually a really good stat, but it gives you no DPS, so all of a sudden it's something that you want to replace as much as possible. Again, keep in mind, if you're a new healer gearing up, highest item level is still going to be the best way to go. To provide a more in-depth look into the stats, you have to consider, again, this is my kind of Resto Shaman right now. I'm running with like 20 plus haste. It is a personal preference in terms of how much haste you want to run. I like to run, and again, I'm not putting a number out there, but I like to run 20 plus haste. My personal opinion, my personal preference, because if you have a really low amount of haste as Resto Shaman, it just feels really bad because all of a sudden your heals are taking so long to cast. Your GCD, like everything is affected by haste. And I honestly feel haste is an enjoyment stat. The more haste you have, the more you enjoy your healer because everything is faster. Now, if you have too much haste, you might run out of mana. So you have to find a good balance that works for yourself. Now, in terms of tools to use for your gearing, Questionably Epic is something that I recommended a bunch of times. I made a bunch of videos about this. You can go to the website, you can load in your character, and you can select dungeon at the very top, and you can right click on your character, and this is going to be a base stat priority. The higher the stat, the better the stat is. Intellect is always going to be the king, that's pretty obvious. This is why item level at early gearing is going to be really important, and then once you get good enough gear, you're going to try to min-max your stats, especially changing your jewelry, your neck, your rings, and things like that. And in here you can see that crit verse, haste are pretty much very close to each other. This is a very good stat priority to follow when you're early on. I do think that the higher key you're gonna do, the higher versatility is going to get, especially in really high keys, but it's just for majority of population out there, this is more than good enough to follow in the early days and go by with your Resto Shaman in Mythic Plus. And now this is going to be the most interesting part of the video, and that's the gameplay. All of the sections, including talent, stat, priority, legendaries, they will provide you with different ways of optimizing your healing, your damage. But the biggest thing that's going to allow your shaman to succeed in Mythic Plus or anything in game right now is going to be how you play, how you use your abilities. If you get your gameplay down, everything else is going to come secondary, and everything else is going to come in time. So first of all, the way that I play my Resto Shaman, this is going to be a Kyrian, best per totem Resto Shaman with Mechanicals, with Diffusive Iron Accelerator. This is going to be with Deep Tremorstone Legendary. This is going to be using Kyrian Covenant specific Legendary as well. We're going to be looking at damage and healing. Your healing is absolutely super easy as Resto Shaman. Straight away, most of your healing abilities are going to be coming down to the fact that you're going to try and get your tidal waves, and that's going to be coming from your Riptide. Your Riptide is going to give you a lot of people ask me, what is this orb? This is your tidal wave prop. Tidal waves, in a lot of cases, is going to make your healing wave faster, and it's going to, the critical effect chance of your next healing surge is going to be increased by 40%. So, without going too much into it, press Riptide and your healing surge is going to be more powerful. Now, majority of your healing is going to be done through Riptide and healing surge spam. Why? This is literally most of your healing. Riptide, healing surge. You want to make sure you use your healing surge when you have tidal waves procs. Your tidal waves come from Riptides and chain heal. And we'll talk about how you get chain heal, because if you have the 4-set bonus and you press Cloudburst Totem, you get tidal waves proc because you casted chain heal. And then you can use healing surge. So your gameplay will change a little bit with 4-set, but it's not going to be impactful enough to actually be like, oh my god, if I get 4-set, I'm gonna spam chain heal. Nothing like that. Bread and butter. Riptide, healing surge. Now, if you're running content where there's going to be a lot of prolonged healing required for 4 or 5 minutes in high tyrannical keys, again, I talked about some of the bosses in TOP, the last boss in Plaguefall, Acid Rain, and all those things. A lot of healing required. You might be running, again, Hakar in DOS. Those kind of encounters require a huge amount of healing, especially in high tyrannicals, for a really long time. And you might be running out of mana, especially if you don't have a 4-set yet. So you might be looking at something like Riptide Healing Wave, because Healing Wave is something that is really mana efficient and you can spam it for a long time. And if you feel like you're going to be running out of mana, you might start thinking about it. Okay, I'm not gonna use Healing Surge. I'm gonna run Healing Wave because my mana is really low, and Hakar is like 80% mana and 80% HP, and I have 30% mana. This could be pretty hairy. I might have to start running Healing Wave. Or for example, if you're doing a Mythic Plus dungeon and you're expecting to get for full mana, you're at 10% mana and you're expecting to get and you don't kill because the DPS messed up or something like that, and you have to conserve mana, Riptide Healing Wave might be an option to conserve it. But it's not used majority of the time. Majority of the time, if you're playing properly, Riptide, Healing Surge, as long as you have your tidal waves proc. You don't have to use Riptide, Healing Surge in that order, but as long as you use Healing Surge with tidal waves present because your critical chances increased, it makes Healing Surge a lot more powerful. This is going to be something that you use majority of the time. Now, with 4-set bonus, there is going to be additional healing happening from your totems. I don't want to talk about the 4-set bonus yet because a lot of people are going to ask me, do you hard cast chain heal? Do you use healing rain? Majority of the time, the answer is no. You're not going to be hard casting chain heal. You're not going to be using healing rain a lot of the times. Like, there are certain situations where I use healing rain. As long as you have again, if there is a point in time where you're doing a dungeon and you feel like majority of your raid or party members are going to stay in healing rain and they're going to be taking consistent damage, yeah, healing rain is a good way of healing. But how many times does this happen? I can tell you right now in which dungeons I use healing rain a lot. So first of all, let's look at Plaguefall, last boss. This boss right here, a lot of the times placing healing rain and cloudburst before acid rain stacks up too much, really important to succeed. In terms of, let's say, majority of sanguine depth bosses, I will probably use healing rain, especially on the second boss as well, because there's a lot of burst healing required. But majority of these bosses, maybe not the last boss, but it depends on how many people have the dot. But a lot of the times, healing rain here is not a bad option because people are going to be taking consistent AoE damage and they're somewhat stacked up. Those are the kind of things you want to look for. Are people stacked up and are they taking consistent AoE damage? If they are, healing rain is not a bad option and you can definitely include it in your rotation. Unfortunately, 95% of the time, that is not going to happen and you're just going to be doing Riptide Healing Surge spam. You could apply a similar thought process to hard casting Chain Heal, but you also have to consider Chain Heal is also getting buffed by your 2-set bonus if you do have it. So there is content where people might be stacked up, so your Chain Heal bounces are going to get max value, people are going to stay in Healing Rain, and there's going to be heavy AoE damage happening at the same time. These spells might be usable, but think of it as a way of building up your Cloudburst, keeping the party healthy. If there's going to be a moment where someone is in immediate danger of dying, you're going to have to apply Triage Healing, which basically means hard casting Healing Surge, hopefully with a Tidal Waves buff. So for example, if someone's at 10% HP, you're not going to cast Healing Rain. If you have a moment where two people, for example a DPS warrior and a mage, are at 10% HP and the next AoE tick is going to kill both of them, you're not going to cast Chain Heal because it's going to take too long. So instead of losing two people, you might hard cast your Healing Surge on something like the DPS warrior and you ask the mage to ice block so you can actually catch up in healing. You're probably going to run into these situations quite often, so tracking DPS personal cooldowns is really important. Knowing what the big defensives are, knowing when to place Healing Rain or even hard cast Chain Heal with something like the 2-set bonus is going to take time. And majority of the time, you're not going to have to use those spells. So this is why this video mainly focuses on the bread and butter Riptide Healing Surge spam. You are maintaining things like Earth Shield. Earth Shield on a tank majority of the times. You can't swap it, but honestly, it's kind of like have a weak aura that tells you if it's not up. Like for example, I have this weak aura right now. If I don't have Earth Shield, it's missing, and I have to use it. It's all good. Maintain that. It's going to increase your single target healing and things like that. Now you might ask, what about Cloudburst Totem? What about Vesper Totem? How do you tie those in? And this is what we're going to go into the next section. The way that I approach a dungeon or trash bag pulls, I am assuming that you are running 4-set bonus. And this is something really important because if you're running 4-set bonus, you're going to be getting a lot of free healing. And a lot of people ask me, should I hard cast Chain Heal? With 4-set bonus, you don't have to do anything different that you did before because you have to read it. First of all, your Chain Heal critical strikes. So just to demonstrate, 2-set bonus, your critical heals are going to provide you with a stack. Again, I need to crit here right now. Give me a juicy crit. Your critical heals are going to give you a stack that's going to make your Chain Heal crit. And this is going to stack up to 50 times. Every stack gives you 2% crit, and around 35 to 40%, depending on how much crit you have, all of a sudden, your crit, your Chain Heal is going to have a guaranteed crit, all of the bounces including. So around 35, 40% or 40 stacks, we're looking at a really nice increase into Chain Heal. What happens is that your totems or select totems are going to shoot out Chain Heal, and that includes your Cloudburst Totem, that includes your Mana Tide Totem, that includes your Healing Tide Totem, and that includes your Spirit Link Totem. So those totems are gonna give you free Chain Heal that bounces out. Now the fun part is that 2-set bonus, that stack, is gonna work with your totem Chain Heal. So for example, right now, if I'm gonna use my, let's get a little bit more crit. If I'm gonna use my Cloudburst Totem right now, it's going to consume the 2-set bonus. It's gonna consume the 2-set bonus and it's gonna give me a juicy Chain Heal. So the Chain Heal just went off, it consumed the 2-set bonus and it went into Cloudburst. So now you have this synergy between your 4-set bonus, your Cloudburst, because your Cloudburst is also gonna shoot out Chain Heal. The Chain Heal or the portion of that Chain Heal healing is also going to go into your Cloudburst, and Cloudburst is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and Cloudburst is going to become a huge source of your healing. To cover the first question, will you hard cast Chain Heal? Most likely not in Mythic Plus situations because you're just going to be using your Cloudburst, your Mana Tide Totem, your Spirit Link Totem, and Healing Tide. Think of your Mana Tide Totem as a throughput cooldown now. If people are running out of, if people are really low, like for example, if everyone's 50% HP, you have like 35 to 40 stacks, 35 to like a lot of stacks of your 2-set bonus, and the only thing that you have available is Mana Tide Totem. That Mana Tide Totem is probably gonna top everyone up or a lot of your party up because of your 4-set bonus. So all of a sudden you gotta think of these not only as totems that provide their initial value, but they'll also give you Chain Heal, and that's really important. So you can just play normally and you can get really big Chain Heals. I would just say that you should try to get your all of those Chain Heals inside your Cloudburst windows. That's probably the only thing that I would say because your Cloudburst is going to get higher and higher in value. You'll notice that the more dungeons you're going to be running with 4-set bonus, your Cloudburst is going to climb and might actually become one of your top heals in certain dungeons, if you play your cloud burst properly. So, how do I approach, before this video is going to get too long, how do I approach healing in dungeons? Let's say this is a trash pack of like 5 mobs or something. Let's say these are 5 mobs and I'm going into a dungeon and I'm honestly waiting for the tank to pull. When the tank pulls, I instantly use Vesper Totem. Now, Vesper Totem is really important to use it on as many enemies as possible because you want to use your Effusive Armor Accelerator. You want to make sure of this. Effusive Armor Accelerator is going to give you DPS, but it's also going to give you cooldown reduction to your Vesper Totem based on how many enemies got hit by the initial hit. So you place it on enemies, or as many enemies as possible. Your Effusive Armor Accelerator here is popping up because it got hit on 2 targets. If the tank moves these enemies, you can place them again because you can't move your Vesper Totem. It does have a cooldown in terms of movement, but the initial hit is the most important. You want to place your Vesper Totem for the first time on as many enemies as possible. Now, what happens afterwards and what do I do? How do I optimize it? Most of the time, I'll just press Cloudburst Totem afterwards. That's most of the time what I'll do because there might be some initial healing needed. Again, if you're running 4-set bonus, you'll notice that your 4-set bonus is going to give you chain heal off your Cloudburst straight away. So that's usually my bread and butter of starting a trash pack pull. Vesper Totem on enemies and then using Cloudburst. Because you have to remember, a lot of people don't know how Cloudburst exactly works with overhealing, but it takes in your overhealing. It takes in a portion, it takes in 30% of your healing done when your Cloudburst is active. And it goes into your Cloudburst. So you don't have to actually do effective healing. All of the healing goes in, overhealing 30% of that. And Cloudburst becomes really, really big with your 4-set bonus because your chain heals are so juicy. And in terms of Vesper Totem, a lot of people are not aware of how Vesper Totem works either. So for example, I place my Vesper Totem and you have 3 DPS abilities and 3 healing abilities. And then after using 3 of those abilities, there's going to be an explosion. The explosion is the big portion of the Vesper Totem because the explosion happens from your Covenant specific legendary, and your Covenant specific legendary gives you damage and healing. But you can go any combination of healing and DPS abilities to proc the first explosion. I can go Flame Shock, Riptide, and then Healing Surge. And then the explosion happens. It doesn't have to be, a lot of people tend to think that it has to be 3 DPS abilities in order to proc the explosion, or 3 healing abilities to proc the explosion. It just has to be any combination of DPS and healing abilities, at least 3 of those abilities, to proc the explosion. So you can honestly mix and match. Think of it as like a mix and match type of thing. I'm going to pop some DPS abilities, I'm going to pop some healing abilities, and after 3 of those, any combination, there's going to be a huge explosion that's going to do healing and damage. And that explosion is something that you want to min-max to an extreme. That explosion is going to be the biggest portion of your damage because if you have a lot of enemies there, you want to make sure you pop that explosion. I was about to say as soon as possible. If you have enemies that are about to die and you want that explosion to go off really, really quickly, instant cast abilities, Flame Shock, Frost Shock, Frost Shock. You just got 3 DPS abilities. Those abilities procced really, really fast. I would definitely have Frost Shock on Keybind because Frost Shock is the #1 option when dealing with explosives. So make sure you have a mouse over macro for Frost Shock in terms of popping it. Now, the only reason I use that combination is that if there's going to be mobs that are about to die and your Vesper Totem is expiring or something and you need to proc your Vesper Totem as soon as possible, that happens to me quite often, and you might actually end up wasting it if you don't proc those DPS or healing abilities fast enough. So, like I mentioned, you use a Vesper Totem, you want to make sure that when you use a Vesper Totem, you're also going to have your Cloudburst, because those explosions that you achieve, so for example, right now I'm going to go Riptide, and I have 1 more healing ability, and there's an explosion. That explosion gives you healing, and that explosion is going to go into your Cloudburst Totem. So you want to make sure your Cloudburst is active, because it's all about building your Cloudburst. So just to showcase my previous point with Vesper Totem, let's say for example we place Vesper Totem, we're gonna go Riptide, we're gonna go Flame Shock, we're gonna go Frost Shock. Explosion happened, and now I have a weak core. Weak core is really important to track this. I have 2 healing abilities and 1 DPS ability that I need to use in order to proc my Vesper Totem. I'm gonna use Riptide, and I'm gonna use Lava Burst, and this explosion happens. It's very important to have a weak aura for your Vesper Totem, and it's important to know how the first explosion happens. It doesn't have to be just 3 DPS abilities or 3 healing abilities. It can be a mix and match of both, and then you have certain charges left on your Vesper Totem. I don't even know how I would use Vesper Totem without having a proper weak aura. The reason I'm placing Vesper Totem first is because on the initial pull is because, you know, the tank hasn't pulled the mobs yet. When the tank pulls the mobs, I'm using my Vesper Totem, tank takes some damage, I'm using Cloudburst Totem does healing because it shoots out Chain Heal, and then I'm using my, again, no one takes damage, I'm gonna go DPS. If someone needs healing, I'm gonna use Riptide Healing Surge. I already have my Tidal Waves. Don't be scared to override your Tidal Waves. There's going to be a lot of the times Tidal Waves might be overwritten because you do have Tidal Waves from Chain Heal, you do get Tidal Waves from Riptide. Don't be too afraid about overriding it. It will happen, it's not that big of a deal. But Vesper Totem into Cloudburst, there's going to be a lot of free healing that you get into your Cloudburst. Vesper Totem Explosions are going to provide you a lot of healing into Cloudburst, and Cloudburst is going to be a big portion of your healing. Now, the biggest thing, or some of the most frequently asked questions, is how do I optimize Cloudburst as a new healer, and when do I pop it, when do I use it? And honestly, I'm going to say it the way it is. People are overcomplicating Cloudburst in so many different ways. Because Cloudburst is probably the most difficult aspect of playing Resto Shaman because it requires some hindsight in terms of what's going to happen. Cloudburst is going to last for 15 seconds. So if you think there's going to be damage happening in the next 15 seconds, you can pop Cloudburst. Cloudburst can be activated by yourself earlier as well, but the majority of the time, the way that I do keys in Mythic Plus is that popping it like really at the start of a trash bag pull, the healing is not going to be wasted most of the time because there's probably going to be some kind of a damage during that trash bag. Majority of the trash bags out there are not going to be that big of a deal unless people are failing interrupts or failing stuns and stuff like that. So just maintaining your Cloudburst at the start of a trash bag pull is not a bad idea. And over time, you're going to get more confident on when to put the Cloudburst. The biggest thing that I can tell you about Cloudburst is tyrannical bosses. There is a lot of min-maxing on tyrannical bosses with Cloudburst. Like for example, last boss in Plaguefall, this, or Infectious Rain, I keep calling Acid Rain, but Infectious Rain ability, when this ability is about to happen, you want to make sure you have Cloudburst available that's rolling and building up, and you have a big Cloudburst that's going to pop off at the end of the stacks, or at the end of the Infectious Rain. Or Acid Rain, I prefer to call it that way, but this is something that's going to require a lot of optimization. For example, the first boss in Plaguefall, there's going to be a knockback happening that's going to do a lot of AoE damage, and you kind of want to have a Cloudburst that you can kind of have at that moment. There's a bunch of bosses in Sanguine Deaths. For example, the first boss, when people are about to explode the orbs, you want to make sure you have a Cloudburst available there that's building up, building up. My biggest advice in terms of Cloudburst building would be for tyrannical bosses and getting used to bosses. Because bosses have a lot of burst AoE healing requirements, and a lot of the harder bosses, that's their damage pattern. AoE requirements or burst healing requirements. Sometimes there is continuous AoE, and if there's continuous AoE, you're just using Cloudburst on cooldown. But if there is burst healing needed, you need to know when damage happens and actually start building it. Previously, I would say you want to place your Cloudburst before damage happens and start building your healing slowly over time, and then when AoE happens, you want to pop it. But now, because of the Foresight bonus, because it shoots out Chain Heal, you probably want to start building Cloudburst when damage happens already, because that Chain Heal is also going to be a good portion of your healing. So with your Foresight bonus and your Cloudburst type of building, it might change a little bit. And then you have to think of your Mana Tide, Spirit Link, like Spirit Link, your Healing Tide, your Mana Tide totems, all of those shoot out Chain Heals. And those Chain Heals are going to be, they're going to provide a lot of healing. And as long as you have a Cloudburst available, that Chain Heal is going to go into Cloudburst, and you're going to build that Cloudburst. So, without talking too much, I know I'm rambling on, but without talking too much, as long as you, again, using Vesper Totem and Trash Bag pulls, having Cloudburst available, making sure to use Cloudburst when people are taking damage because of a Chain Heal, making sure you use your other totems inside a Cloudburst. Cloudburst is going to expire after 15 seconds. But you're going to have another charge of it available, and you're possibly going to have more charges of Cloudburst available, because if your Chain Heals crit, individual Chain Heal crits are going to reduce the cooldown of your totems depending on how many totems you have on cooldown. So you're probably going to have even more Cloudbursts. There's going to be more Cloudburst charges, there's going to be more ways to feed your Cloudburst. And just a quick summary of some of the cooldowns you have as Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman has a lot of cooldowns in terms of Spirit Link totems. Again, Healing Tide totem is something that You can't press. Again, it's a lot stronger with force set bonus because it shoots out chain heal, so you definitely should consider it as a burst healing AoE tool. I honestly can tell you that Resto Shaman with force set bonus is one of the best burst healers out there because of that, because of the fact that it shoots out those chain heals, and that force set chain heal also synchronizes with your 2 set, and it just becomes really nice to get that force set as much as possible, just insanely nice. But you have your Spirit Link, you have your Ascendance. I think these are the biggest oh crap buttons. A lot of the time Spirit Link is going to be used as a tank defensive. A lot of the times because you don't have a tank defensive that you can use. If you play Resto Druid, you have Iron Bark and all those things, but as Resto Shaman you don't have it. You have Ascendance, you can talent into it. Keep in mind Ascendance has like a burst of healing when you first use it. And that burst of healing can actually also help out if someone is really low. You might actually be like, oh crap, I have everything on cooldown, but Ascendance is available. Okay, I'm gonna pop Ascendance. And also I have to say that Spirit Link is what a lot of people talk about Spirit Link, and they might misuse Spirit Link a lot of the time. Spirit Link has 10% damage reduction associated with it straight away. So think of it as a DUR cooldown. But if you use Spirit Link and you have no healing to back it up. Like, let's say for example, there is a lot of dungeons out there. Spires of Ascension, second last boss. This guy right here, there's tank damage needed. If you're running Blood Decay is probably gonna heal up most of the time, but there's going to be a dot on a DPS or healer that you need to heal up. And that dot can be really spicy on high tyrannical keys, and you need to focus on that one person. There's only one person that needs that healing, and you're focusing, healing, surging. You might put Urge Shield on them, Riptide, healing surge type of thing. And you might, or some Resto Shamans might be like, okay, I'm gonna pop Spirit Link straight away. If you pop Spirit Link straight away on a person that just got that debuff, all of a sudden you need to heal up a lot of members. All of a sudden you need AoE healing. So on single target mobs like that, I would not use Spirit Link. The only time I would use Spirit Link when a single person needs healing, if that person is about to die, I have no other cooldowns available, and I'm just gonna use Spirit Link. Everyone's gonna lose HP, and I'm just gonna hope I have some healing backed up. But majority of the time, if there's only one person taking damage, using Spirit Link at the start of the dot is going to lead to more healing requirements than just healing one person. Something to consider. Again, keep in mind, with force set bonus is a little bit different because Spirit Link also gives you chain heal. If you don't have force set bonus, it can honestly be a bad thing to use Spirit Link in these situations. Encounters where there's a dot, a long lasting dot, and there's going to be continuous damage happening. If I use Spirit Link, I need to make sure I have some healing to back up the Spirit Link usage, because everyone in the party is going to need healing. So a lot of the time I might use Spirit Link with Ascendance, or I might have something like, let's say for example here, I have a juicy Cloudburst right now. Oh, it's stacking up really. Everyone's taking huge amount of damage. Everyone's gonna die. I use my Spirit Link. Spirit Link shoots out chain heal. Everyone's losing HP. Everyone's 10%, and then my Cloudburst pops. So I might have Cloudburst or stack up my Cloudburst before I use Spirit Link, just to make sure that everyone's going to be topped up after you use Spirit Link. So something to consider. So now let's go to Resto Shaman DPS, because it is going to be important with DPS with Resto Shaman, because if you're running Mythic Plus dungeons with someone like a Blood Decay, you might not even need to heal them any time throughout the dungeon if they're really good, and all of a sudden you're going to have a lot of downtime. And there's a different kind of rotation for single target, 2 targets, and 3+ targets, and especially if you're running different kind of legendaries. In this section, I do want to talk about, we're talking about single target first, but I want to talk about the fact that you're going to have your Earth Elemental, because your Earth Elemental is part of your DPS rotation. It's a pure DPS legendary, and I am running, a lot of people ask, my Earth Elemental is dying all the time, how can I prevent this? If you're using your Earth Elemental during a trash back pull, even if the tank has sufficient aggro, there is going to be times when Earth Elemental is going to snap aggro for 1 second in a high fortified key, and it's just going to die. There's not going to be a lot of things that you can prevent. A lot of the times if you use your Earth Elemental on a boss fight, it's not going to pull aggro from the boss, so it's almost guaranteed DPS increase, but it's not going to be an insane amount of damage versus using it on a trash pack, but it's safer. So it's up to you to decide if you're better off using it on a single target versus a pretty safe option of using it on a single target versus a pretty dangerous option using it on a trash pack pull. But if you use it on a trash pack pull, on click, I have it set to number 5. When I press button 5 twice, there's going to be a focus set to my Earth Elemental, and I can heal. So right now, if I use my Earth Elemental, it's going to go onto the target. I'm gonna press it again, and there is a focus set on this Earth Elemental, and if it takes any aggro, I can heal this Earth Elemental. And this way, I can try to prevent, again, if the high fortified key, one hit, your Earth Elemental is gonna die. So keep that in mind. But single target DPS rotation, let's say this is a single target. I like to start it off with Vesper Totem, place it close to the enemy. I maintain Flame Shock on a target. I use all of my Lava Burst charges, and then I go my filler Lightning Bolt. Now there is going to be 3 charges that I need to proc with healing, and I like to do that with Riptide. And then I go back to my DPS rotation, Lava Burst, Flame Shock, Lightning Bolt. Then my Riptide comes off cooldown, and then I press it again, and the explosion happens. You need to make sure, even on a single target DPS, on a single target boss where there's no one taking damage, like for example, Halls of Atonement first boss is the prime example where if you do it properly, not many people are going to take any damage, and you're just basically full on DPSing the whole time. In those case situations, you still want to proc your Vesper Totem healing portion, because the healing portion does AoE DPS. That healing portion is still important. The way I proc it, if there's no damage whatsoever, there's no healing needed whatsoever, I just put my Riptide and Riptide on targets. And then I'm going to get the 3rd charge of Riptide, and then I press it again. So, single target rotation, Vesper Totem, Flame Shock, maintain Flame Shock on a target. And then, you see this is your Lava Surge proc. This means you're going to have an instant cast Lava Burst. Lava Burst is really good on a single target. It's going to always crit on a target that has Flame Shock. And it's also important to know that you can use, if you're casting Lava Burst at that given moment, you can put Flame Shock afterwards, and it's still gonna crit. They changed that a little while ago. It used to be so annoying to do that, where you're halfway casting Lava Burst and you don't have Flame Shock on the target, and you're like, should I cancel my Lava Burst? But right now, if you have Lava Burst, if you're casting Lava Burst, you can apply Flame Shock afterwards and it's going to crit, and then your filler is Lightning Bolt. So Vesper Totem, simple Flame Shock, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt, Earth Elemental if you want for that single target damage, because it is not going to die on a boss fight. Now on 2 targets it's going to be a little bit different, because you're going to be trying to maintain your Flame Shock on 2 targets, but you're also going to be replacing Lightning Bolt with Chain Lightning as a filler. So for example, you're going to be wanting to apply Flame Shock on the next target, but you're going to be using Lava Surge procs to use your Lava Burst, and then outside of that you're going to be Chain Lightning. So you're going to Chain Lightning on 2 targets, and then you're going to get a bunch of Lava Surge procs. You're going to try and, you know, reapply your Flame Shocks. Your Lava Surges are going to go wild. They're like proccing a lot. You're going to be using your Lava Surges, Chain Lightning, applying Flame Shock. There is, and we're going to go into 3 target rotation. This is the 2 target rotation. We're going to go into 3 target rotation because they're not that strict. I'm saying this in terms of pure DPS increase, but a lot of the times as a healer, let's say this is 3 targets. Once you get 3 targets, you're basically just Chain Lightning. That's it. You're doing nothing else but just Chain Lightning. This is going to be theoretically the highest DPS output, but it doesn't always work out like that in Mythic Plus content, because there's always going to be priority targets and trash bags. There's always going to be a trash bag pool where one guy has more HP, especially in bolstering weeks where, you know, the HP might not be always equal. There's always going to be a person that needs more priority DPS than others. So even though theoretically in a lot of the cases just spamming Chain Lightning and 3+ targets is the best DPS, I like to maintain Flame Shock on the priority target, and I like to use my Lava Surge procs on them, or even hard cast sometimes Lava Burst on them. This is less DPS than casting Chain Lightning, but if you're running the meta comp with Destruction Warlock, with Survival Hunter, you don't need AoE damage. You need priority single target damage on a lot of targets. So focusing on the priority target and maintaining Flame Shock on them, I don't think it's a bad deal. It's less overall damage, but technically not all damage is ethical. So you have to think of damage as ethical. There's a lot of times where people just AoE pad. So another point, on 3+ targets, on a lot of AoE targets, you can spam Chain Lightning. If there's no priority target, I just spam Chain Lightning all day, just get good amount of DPS. There is going to be a time when you feel like, oh crap, tank needs healing. Oh crap, there's a DPS that needs healing. Oh, there's someone else that needs healing. So this is why I like to maintain Flame Shock even on large trash bags. Because if I know there's going to be a moment when I'm like, oh crap, tank needs healing, so I have to go and cast my Healing Surge, I know that there's going to be a Flame Shock on that target, on that enemy, and it's going to be dealing damage and giving me a chance of Lava Surge procs when I'm healing the party. So this is why I feel like even on AoE trash packs, maintaining your dots and flame shocks when you know you have to heal in the next couple of seconds is not a bad way of doing it, because flame shock is a dot. It's gonna continuously do damage, even when you're healing. So something to consider. Are you approaching a trash pack pull where there's absolutely going to be no AoE damage or any damage happening to your party, and every single mob is just a smallie, doesn't have priority targets? Yeah, chain lightning to your heart's content. Do it as much as possible. There's no priority targets, no one's taking any damage. I am juicing, I am doing crazy amount of damage right now. Is the priority target in that party? Is the priority target in that trash pack pull? Do I need to focus on something? Is it a bolstering week? Then yeah, I would start using flame shock. Is there going to be healing needed in the next couple of seconds? Then yeah, I might start spreading my flame shocks if I know I'm gonna have to spend some time healing. So even though there is a theoretical best DPS way of dealing with these situations, you still have to consider priority targets, and you still have to consider, am I gonna be spending all this time DPSing, or do I also have to heal a little bit? So overall, Resto Shaman is a really fun healer, and I didn't even talk a lot about their utility spells in terms of like AoE, Stone Slow, Tremor, their defenses, Astral Shift. There is a lot of buttons that Resto Shaman has, but a lot of those buttons are not really used that often. The base rotation for DPS and healing for Resto Shaman is really simple. It's all about maximizing your cloud burst in terms of healing, optimizing your Vesper Totem for healing and DPS, and it works really well. And just to do a sample run of what I would usually do, let's assume there's 5 enemies here, and let's assume there's no priority target, or I can focus on any enemy at a given point. Let's say I'm gonna start off, let's say we have a Blood Decay goes in and pulls. They might not need a lot of healing. I'm gonna start off with Vesper Totem, then someone needs healing, I'm gonna go with Cloud Burst is gonna shoot out Chain Heal, and then I'm gonna go with Chain Lightning Spam. And you can see here, after I'm going to proc the Vesper Totem, and then I need 2 more heals to proc Vesper Totem. I know I'm going to be healing, so I might apply Flame Shock, I might use Riptide again, Vesper Totem explodes, I'm going back to Chain Lightning Spam. Now someone needs healing, single target healing. I have 2 Tidal Wave procs right now. I'm gonna go on them, and I'm gonna go Healing Surge. They should be fine at this given moment. I go back to DPSing. There might only be 1 target left. I'm gonna go into Flame Shock, Lava Burst, Lightning Bolt mode. Is there going to be more healing needed? If there is, I press Cloud Burst again. I'm still going back to the DPS. If there needs to be more healing, I'm gonna go and start healing them with Tidal Wave procs. If I don't have Tidal Waves, I'm gonna apply Riptide. I'm gonna apply Riptide again if they need it. And I'm going to make sure to use Healing Surge with Tidal Waves while they're available. So this is like a really theoretical idea of what I would do in like a 5 trash pack pull or something. You can watch my videos, my streams on how I do other dungeons. I might do a commentary video and things like that, but the rotation is not difficult. The healing rotation, the damage rotation is not difficult for Resto Shaman. Optimizing your Cloud Burst has become a lot easier with the Foresight bonus because the chain heals are so big. And Resto Shaman overall is probably the best burst healer right now because of the Foresight bonus. It provides, in a perfect situation, Kyrian with Earth Elemental Lego is probably the best damaging healer, but in a perfect situation. Earth Elemental most of the time cannot be used on cooldown, especially on high fortified trash pack pulls, because it probably will die. But I think Resto Shaman is a very good option. I apologize for a really long video. It wasn't supposed to be this long, but I hope that you got something from this video, something new. I really hope this helped you. If it did, let me know. Let me know if I missed out on something, and I'll see you in my next guide.